everyone can see my slide, right? Okay. Today I want to present about oil crisis in economy. The first oil crisis in the world, which is the 1973. Okay. An oil crisis is defined as an increase in oil prices large enough to cause a worldwide recession or a significant reduction in global real gross domestic product (GDP) below projected rate by 2 or 3% percentage point. The 1973 oil crisis caused a decline in GDP of 4.7% in the US, 2.5% in Europe, and 7% in Japan. An oil crisis could be precipitated by a rapid expansion in global economy, fueling greater consumption of oil, or by a lack of spare production capacity, causing demand to outstrip supply, or a combination of both. It could also be caused by a sudden disruption in oil supply triggered by a political event or acts of sabotage against oil installation in major oil producing countries, or even by a deliberate political decision by a major producer or a group producer to cut supply. In oil crisis, a sudden rise in the price of oil that is often accompanied by decreased supply, since oil provides the main source of energy for advanced industrial economics. An oil crisis can endanger economic and political stability throughout the global economy. In the post-World War II period, there have been two major oil crises. The first occurred in 1973 when Arab members of OPEC, Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, decide to quadruple the price of oil to almost $12 a barrel, and then oil export to the United States, Japan, and Western Europe, which together consume more than half the world energy, were also prohibited. OPEC's decision was made in retaliation for Western support of Israel against Egypt and Syria during the Yom Kippur War, 1973, and in response to a persistent decline in the value of the US dollar, which had eroded the export earnings of OPEC state. With the global capitalist economy already experiencing difficulties, this action precipitated a steep recession accompanied by rising inflation. This forced capitalist countries to embark on a process of economic restructuring in order to reduce their dependency on oil, and prompted fears that the United States might take military action in order to secure free access to its energy supply. Although the oil embargo was lifted in 1974, oil prices remained high and the capitalist world economy continued to stagnate throughout the 1970s. And another major oil crisis is in 1979. Okay, then in 1975, global slowdown. The recession was due to the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries (OPEC), who rose gas prices and imposed an embargo against US. The cause of this recession was due to the unemployment being too high. So that's all from me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. This is our class, seminar class. So supposed to be exchanges of questions. So the most important thing in all the slides is that how this particular crisis that you focus on impacted Malaysia. That's number one. How that impacted Malaysia. Number two, how Malaysia managed the crisis. Managed to soften the crisis or to get out of the crisis. How? What are the things were taken? Actions, measures taken. These are the two things. All of you, each one of you will add on. Okay. So let me ask you, what was the impact on Malaysia? I mean, those who have not put in the slide, you still have time. Put it in the slide, in your slide. What was the impact on Malaysia? Number one. Number two, how Malaysia did it to tackle the crisis. Two things. So may I ask you, what happened to Malaysia? How that impacted Malaysia? And secondly, that one, how Malaysia managed. I may help you if you don't know, but I want to hear it from you first. Okay, go ahead. And other students must also ask questions. That's how seminar is. Okay, go ahead. Yes. Waiting for your answer.
I think impact to the oil crisis give impact to Malaysia is make our oil price in oil become increased because we also import oil from the other country.
Can you go into the global phenomenon at that time, and then the global phenomenon will definitely impact Malaysia the same way. Okay. Can you? What are the two phenomenon? Oil shock. What would happen to the world? That's number one thing. Can you respond? Oil prices. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Oil in the wake of crisis, many producer nations began to assert greater control over their oil resources in 1973. So oil was no longer to be exploited to fuel only the needs of the industrialist world, but was seen as a strategic resources that can fund the development of border nation. So Malaysia was no exception. There were two strategic initiatives undertaken by the government in 1974 after that. Firstly was to incorporate a national oil company such as Petronas, and then secondly was to enact and pass the petroleum development in parliament, which is effectively vested upon Petronas to the entire concession to explore, develop and produce petroleum resources in the country.
Those are from where? You have to mention the source that you're reading from.
Reading this from, I get this from Third OPEC International Seminar OPEC in a New Energy Era, Challenge and Opportunities by Nasaruddin Muhammad Idris, Vice President Corporate Planning and Development Division Petronas.
Anyone else want to respond? This is a seminar type. Can anyone else respond?
How is national consumer from our people react to the global oil crisis in 1971? I mean, in terms of goods, let's say automobile. Do we maybe do you agree that before the global oil crisis, we Malaysian prefer European automobile before the global crisis, but then after the crisis we prefer Japanese automobile due to their fuel consumption, low fuel consumption. Yeah. Do you agree with me?
Yeah. These are some of the so-called anecdotal story of what happened as a reaction. But still, I'm holding what I'm gonna say was really the impact and how Malaysia managed. Anyone else want? I will tell that. Later, I want to hear from other contribution. So please, we have here Nur, Husnina. Anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Nabiha, Najwa, you want to add something? Tanusha, you want to add something?
So far, no, sir.
You should have. More info. Mama Idwan. You want to add something? Question or add information to that? Yes, Mama Idwan.
So
Janani, anything that you want to contribute on to this discussion?
No, sir.
Before I tell what I'm gonna tell you, everyone can still add on your slide. Take your time right now. Two things you must add if you just in case you don't have it. The impact on Malaysia, number one. Number two, how Malaysia managed it. Okay. What was the impact of? Okay, now I'm telling you. The impact of the two oil shocks. Number one. You must say this word. Very popular today. That word. Inflation. 1970s. I've been telling you in my classes. I think almost every my class. 1970s was the decade of inflation. 1970s because of the two oil shocks. So there was a global rise in the rates of inflation. And same thing happened to Malaysia. The impact on Malaysia was high inflation, imported inflation, because of the oil shocks, the crisis. So that's the answering you number one. What was the impact? Inflation. Prices go up or went up. Past tense, went up. So answering number two, what did Malaysian government do? All the measures to tame inflation and to overcome inflation, to overcome the burden on the people. One of them is the agriculture. We had long ago red book. Now so-called red book is a green book to energize the agriculture sector as a way for people to live better, because they have to pay more for all the necessities. So agriculture was one of the sectors that was the government was putting on the effort to energize, to restart again the agriculture sector. Food, especially the food sector. Along with what was mentioned, the Parliament passed the Petroleum Act for Malaysia to at that time to do finding of oil. There was a reserve of oil found, and then to have Malaysia's own supply of oil. And other measures by the government having to do with interest rate. Every time that there is inflation, the government must adopt a tight monetary policy. And that could be together with tight fiscal policy. So what is tight monetary policy? To increase interest rates. So the government did increase interest rate. I don't know how many percent. You can find the detail. So the government managed the oil crisis in Malaysia with agriculture sector. And at that time, Malaysia was not yet really a powerhouse in manufacturing. So agriculture was looked upon as a so-called savior to save the people from the inflation that was bringing the burden on the cost of living for them. And at that time, anything that uses used oil would be affected. And Mahdi just mentioned about interesting. I overlooked about the story. You know, the Japanese cars.
because of oil crisis,
The Japanese cars,
the Japanese cars became top.
there was a
There was a time that American was guzzling their oil, the Chevrolet, all those Buick, all those whatever brand, Continental,
and other brands,
which is drank a lot of oil. And now, at that time, American people also started to American manufacturers started to produce compact and subcompact model of their brands, and there was an invasion of Japanese car into the American market as well as to Malaysia.
Anything else?
Anything else you want to add?
We're gonna move on.
We're gonna move on to the next presenter. Anything? Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amirul.
Thank you, Amirul.
If there's no
Other questions? So
let me call
upon next presenter. Get your slides ready now.
I'm opening.
Anyone want to add anything?
You still have time.
While the other presenter, who's next presenter, is preparing
on the slide.
to put on the slide.
Anything you wanna?
Anything you want to add?
Who's presenting next?
Who's presenting next?
Get your slide ready.
Get your slide ready now.
If
If there's no other intervention,
start.
Please start your presentation.
Your slide now.
Your slide now. Anything you want to add? Who's presenting next? Get your slide ready now. There's no other intervention. Start. Please start your presentation.
Who's presenting now?
Who's presenting now?
Quickly.
Your slide now. Waiting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Waiting.
We must follow the order, or can anyone just present?
Can anyone, please? Anyone, please. We don't have much time. So anyone can go on. Waiting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Waiting. Yeah.
We must follow the order, or can anyone just present?
Can anyone, please? We don't.
Can see my slide?
Yep.
Okay, today I'm going to present East Asian financial crisis in 1997 to 1998. Okay, Asian financial crisis in 1997 to 1998 is one of the significant events in the history of Malaysia economy and also Asia. This crisis started in Thailand, but as one of the Asian countries, Malaysia also stuck in this currency crisis and it persisted and hit all of Asian countries. That's why this phenomenon called as Asian infection and the crisis of confidence. And Malaysia is one of the successful countries in handling this great crisis. Okay, what is the Asian financial crisis? The Asian financial crisis is a crisis that caused by the collapse of the currency exchange rate and hot money bubble in East and Southeast Asia in 1997. It started in Thailand in July 1997 and swept over East and Southeast Asia. The financial crisis heavily damaged currency values, stock markets, and other asset prices in many East and Southeast Asian countries. Okay, this is the timeline of the Asian financial crisis. Okay, on to July 1997, the Thai government ran out of foreign currency, which made them no longer able to support its exchange rate, and the government was forced to float the Thai baht, which was pegged to the US dollar before. The currency exchange rate of the baht thus collapsed immediately. 2 weeks later, on 18 July, where the Philippine peso and Indonesian rupiah underwent major devaluations as well. The crisis spread internationally and Asian stock markets plunged to their multi-year low in August. The capital market of South Korea maintained relatively stable until October. However, the Korean won dropped to its new low on 28 October, and the stock market experienced its biggest one-day drop to that date on November 8. Okay, causes of the Asian financial crisis. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, many Southeast Asian countries, including Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and South Korea, achieved a massive economic growth of an 8% to 12% increase in their gross domestic product (GDP). The achievement was known as the Asian economic miracle. The economic developments in the countries mentioned above were mainly boosted by export growth and foreign investment. Therefore, high interest rate and fixed currency exchange rate pegged to the US dollar were implemented to attract hot money. Also, the exchange rate was pegged at a rate favorable to exporters. However, both the capital market and corporates were left exposed to foreign exchange risk due to the fixed currency exchange rate policy. In the mid-1990s, following the recovery of the US from a recession, the Federal Reserve raised the interest rate against inflation. The higher interest rate attracted hot money to flow into the US market, leading to an appreciation to the US dollar. The currencies pegged to the US dollar also appreciated and thus hurt export growth, with a shock in both export and foreign investment. Asset price, which were leveraged by large amount of credits, began to collapse. The panicked foreign investor began to withdraw all their money, and the massive capital outflow caused depreciation pressure on the currencies of the Asian countries. The Thai government first ran out of foreign currency to support its exchange rate, forcing it to float to the baht. The value of the baht thus collapsed immediately afterward. The same also happened to the rest of the Asian countries soon after. Okay, effect of the Asian financial crisis. Okay, the countries that were most severely affected by the Asian financial crisis included Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, South Korea, and the Philippines. They saw their currency exchange rate, stock market, and price of other assets all plummet. The GDPs of the affected countries even fell by the double digits. From 1996 to 1997, the nominal GDP per capita dropped by 43.2% in Indonesia, 21.2% in Thailand, 90% in Malaysia, 18.5% in South Korea, and 12.5% in the Philippines. Hong Kong, mainland China, Singapore, and Japan were also affected, but less significantly. Besides its economic impact, the Asian financial crisis also resulted in political repercussions. The Prime Minister General of Thailand, Yong Chai-Yut, and the President of Indonesia, Suharto, resigned. An anti-Western sentiment was triggered, especially against George Soros, who was blamed for triggering the crisis with large amount of currency speculation by some individuals. The impact of the Asian financial crisis was not limited to Asia. International investors become less willing to invest in and lend to developing not only in Asia but in other areas of the world. Oil prices also fall due to the crisis. As a result, some major mergers and acquisitions in the oil industry took place to achieve economies of scale. Okay, IMF role in the Asian financial crisis. The International Monetary Fund is an international organization that promotes global monetary cooperation and international trade, reduce poverty and support financial stability. The IMF generated several bailouts, which known as a rescue package for the most affected countries during the financial crisis. It provides package of around 20 billion to Thailand, 40 billion to Indonesia, 59 billion to South Korea to support them so that they did not default. The bailout package are structural adjustment package. The countries that receive the package were asked to reduce their government spending, allow insolvent financial institutions to fail and raise interest rates aggressively. The purpose of the adjustment was to support the currency values and confidence over the country's solvency. Okay, Malaysia's responses to Asian financial crisis. Malaysia also has get offers of financial aid from the IMF. However, the Malaysian government rejected the offer. The factors government reject IMF offer is because the given conditions seem that will make the economy and social become more worse. However, there are also regional countries that accept this offer to revive their economy, such as Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea. After rejecting the IMF offer, Malaysia has introduced a new economic model to ease the pressures of the crisis and stabilize the economy in 1998. Among the content of the package are as follows. 1. Firstly, interest rate reduction that allow companies and consumers to have a chance to break back with loans. Secondly, stabilize the ringgit by tying the US dollar, which is $1 equivalent to 3 ringgit 80 cents. Ringgit trading closed overseas as well as stock trading in Singapore. Next, controlling capital flows, especially short-term capital flows by foreign investors and locals. Lastly, restructuring of the corporate and banking sectors to enable macroeconomic recovery. Conclusion. In the following years, Malaysia managed to overcome the crisis in the economy worst in Asia. The greatness of the leaders during that time in rejecting IMF loan offer, in fact, is one of the biggest factors of Malaysia become famous in overcoming this crisis. The leaders' bold move had saved the nation from feeling deeper. The capital control implementation has led the country to faster recovery compared to other countries which have opted to IMF. That's all.
Thank you. Nur Husnaina. Yeah. I wish that you're
Tak dengar, sir.
Oh. I unmute my microphone. I wish you could also touch on the government vehicle established to take Malaysia away out of this crisis. Number one, I should mention the restructuring that the Malaysian government was doing. Restructuring number one was during that time one particular thing that came out strongly or evidently or pop up was the NPL, non-performing loan. So why NPL, non-performing loan, is very important part of the crisis? Was that will create a crisis within the financial sector when a lot of loan people cannot pay back. this NPL
that will
bring
that will create
that will create havoc to
banking sector,
the banking sector especially.
okay?
NPL.
So
So
one of the things
the government did was that
to
to
redefine
what
what
was
NPL.
NPL. Previously, it was 6 months. After you do not pay your loan for 6 months, that loan is
called
bad loans. Yeah.
or
Simply we call it bad loans. NPL, non-performing loan. Loan which has not been paid back 6 months. So they cut it from 6 months, the definition, to 3 months. Why? To bring more discipline into the banking sector. Discipline on the both parts, on the sides of the borrower and also on the side of the bank. So that's one of the things the government is restructuring the banking sector and
look at the
regulations in the banking sector and
to make sure
there is a prudence
in the banking sector.
in the banking sector. You cannot just give loan to everyone
and make sure
that you
the loans you
give
will be
paid back. So
it seems
a very contrasting idea from what we saw during the COVID-19. Recently during the COVID-19 pandemic, the government makes it easy
for the
people, for the borrowers. Instead, the opposite.
we call it
moratorium. Okay, there was a moratorium. Okay, you don't have to pay now. Moratorium for 1 year. But during the crisis of financial crisis, the opposite way the government took the measure, which is to tighten the banking sector, to restructure. One of them was that the NPL. And other things the government established. You must mention the vehicles that was contained in the book here. What I'm not seeing myself. Can all of you can see this?
Cannot see.
I'm holding a book. Cannot see. Can you see myself talking?
The camera stop.
Camera stop.
Stop. Hang.
Hang. That's why I'm not seeing myself as well. The camera hang.
So in the book,
Red Book that National Economic Recovery Plan, Agenda for Action.
And you must also refer to
other writing because the National Economic Recovery Plan, Agenda for Action, published in August 1998, was a plan proposed by the National Economic Action Council under the Economic Planning Unit,
the
the NEAC, National Economic Action Council. The book is a proposal, a plan. So you must refer to the actual. In the end, you must refer to the actual measures taken by the government. So there was the government established this something like Dana Harta. Yes, Dana Harta. Then the other one I forgot. These are the vehicles for restructuring.
And the other one
just doesn't
cross to my mind. So please refer
to those.
Just
Doesn't pop up to my mind right now. So
what I'm saying,
the vehicles to
number
one to restructure the economy.
Vehicle number two
is to restructure the loads. Yes, that was Dana Harta.
The
government assume some part of government was trying to tackle the non-performing loan. What happened to non-performing loan? Basically banks,
it is not in
the interest of banks to hold properties like someone bought a house and cannot pay back, default on the loan of housing. So
there's a
foreclosure. Bank get it back. But it is not in the interest of banks to hold properties, houses, and so on. So here come the Dana Harta to manage that. See, I forgot the other one. So please go back to the actual implementation by the government. So, anyone want to add? Please go ahead now. Does anyone want to add to the discussion? Discussion on the actual implementation, the details of implementation by the government.
Or they mention
pegging, capital control, and
the response
at that time
by the
IMF
and World Bank.
They were cynical about what Malaysia did. Cynical. Look at it. So-called negatively. But in the end, Malaysia did it. That's why the Frank Sinatra way of Malaysia. I did my own way. That was a song. So Dr. Mahathir did it his own way to get out from this. Compared with Thailand, Indonesia, Korea, these are the three countries that went to the IMF to get bailout loan from the IMF with the strings attached. Must restructure this and that, including selling companies selling part of national companies to letting foreign companies to take up to buy over. However, in Korea, they're trying to prevent that from happening. For example, Hyundai bought Kia Previously, Kia was a separate company, but because of the East Asian financial crisis, preventing Kia from being taken over by foreign company, Hyundai bought Kia. So until today, actually, Kia and Hyundai the same company. And Daewoo was gone. The automotive branch or arms of Daewoo, and it's gone, no more. Many other things, including banks. Some banks in Korea gone because of consolidated to become a one single bank.
But for
Malaysia, in the end, Malaysia did it, and the global community started to think differently about economic crisis, about financial crisis, about there was previously only one way. Many people believe only one way, the IMF way, which is you must restructure your economy, you must what call this? Reduce your currency devaluation, so that you can export more, and all this prescription of neoliberal prescription, which is LDP, liberalize, deregulation, and privatization. LDP. These are the things of neoliberal prescription, or so-called medicine prescribed by the neoliberalists, which is in the IMF and World Bank. LDP. Liberalization. What's liberalization? Liberalize. Open up your economy, your country to foreign competition, to foreigners actually. Let them buy. Open up. Liberalize. If they want to buy, Let them buy. Yep. So of course, if you take the insurance company, banking company, they are giant. They can just like swoop, like a snake, sloping the victims, because Citibank, one of the biggest in the world. If there's truly liberalization, Citibank can just easily buy Maybank, can just easily buy Bank Bhumiputra at that time, before change to. There was Bank of Bhumiputra and all other things. Takes insurance company, Prudential company, insurance can just buy any Malaysian company because of the sheer size, big size. So there's a threat in all this. With liberalization, it means that you liberalize, you open up to foreign entities and companies to purchase, along with other definition of liberalization, investment and so on. But that's okay, investment. But when foreign companies buying your properties, foreign companies buying your national companies, that's a thing seriously to consider. So less liberalization, deregulation. What is deregulation? DE in front. D means negative of something. So reduce the regulations to make it easy for foreign companies to come in, to invest, to come in, to start business, to buy, to do whatever. Deregulations. Not only foreign companies within it. The idea was to make less regulation so that to make it easy for business, local business, domestic business to start business again. But that applies together, not just for the local companies, foreign companies as well, because liberalization, deregulation together. And third, LDP, privatization. The government must get out from the economy. Because we know in Malaysia there is a GLC, government-linked companies, GLCs. These are the companies like Tenaga Nasional. This is GLC. These are very important for the country. For example, Tenaga Nasional. The government must have some share in the company, and there are many other companies as well. So there's a threat to the country with the privatization. The idea is good. The idea is nothing wrong with the idea, which is laissez-faire from Adam Smith. The government should not be doing things that private companies can do better. What is laissez-faire? Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Laissez-faire is a French word. It means leave it alone. Leave the economy, leave the companies and so on to the hands of the private sector, not the government. The government just focus on governing, which is to provide security, national defense, and so on. So the idea is good, but in the case of many countries, we cannot have, especially developing countries, we cannot have truly laissez-faire as Adam Smith envisioned. The government must have some involvement in the running of the economic sector. However, Malaysia really embarked on the privatization. Malaysia has this. I don't know. My camera is still down. Privatization plan. And with privatization, actually, Malaysia did it. Before Tenaga Nasional, it was LLN, Lembaga Elektrik Negara. It was corporatized to become Tenaga Nasional that we have today. Telekom Malaysia, it was Syarikat Telekom, Jabatan Telekom Malaysia, Jabatan Telekom Malaysia became Telekom Malaysia, but still the government must have some share through GLC, through government arms of investment arm, to have shares in the running of this very important infrastructure facilities companies. So Malaysia did it. Privatization. Yes, Malaysia did it. But still, GLC is still important. So if Malaysia borrowed from the IMF, follow the IMF way, this thing, GLC, no more GLC. The government must 100% get out from the economy. So,
anyone want to add?
anyone want to add?
I remember what I said.
I remember what I said. The world started to
have a second
look
in terms of
policies
policies
to get out from crisis.
Not
Not only
IMF way
of LDP. Malaysia did it well with the capital control
and
pegging and restructure on Malaysia's own term.
you
You see, when you do not borrow from people, you're not being nose tag dicucuk hidung in Malay. You must do this, must do this, yes, very important. I forgot. One of the things with IMF
to get out of the
crisis
is
to reduce expenditure, government expenditure on
you guess what? One of the
Easiest place to cut government spending is on the social
and on the poor. So this is not good.
So
The
the IMF wants you to cut expenditure on social expenditure. What I mean by social expenditure,
you know,
especially the poor.
the
The benefits, the subsidies, and all those
the
handouts
and
and
all the programs
all the programs for the poor
will
will be
the easiest
the easiest target
to cut.
You cannot cut the government expenditure on the economic sector because you need it. You cannot cut expenditure on
that.
on economic.
You
You
may
may
choose
choose
to
to
cut
cut
on
on defense,
but
but not many country
can do that.
Defense is important too. Besides social expenditure on the poor, education also
is a
is a place that governments can cut easily, reduce subsidies, expenditure on education, no more scholarship. Yes, increase the student fees. All this. These are the sectors of the economy
that the
government
will find it
easy place to cut.
and
And also health,
expenditure on
health. So in the end,
the country will
will suffer
if the
country follow IMF way,
which is
you must cut expenditure.
you cannot spend.
You cannot spend.
Anything else you
Want to add?
because we are short on time.
Please one person please add on this topic. I'm waiting for one person at least.
Cik Syukri, since our ringgit is decreasing today, why can't we peg our ringgit to dollar like we have done in 1997?
There was a polemic on that right now. Dr. Mahathir was suggesting we could do again the pegging. Bank Negara answer, the best way is just to follow the market signal. Let the market do all these things. So,
in a way,
in a way,
Bank Negara
Bank Negara may be correct, because the crisis
that we are
seeing today is kind of global crisis.
not only
Not only Malaysia is globally inflation, and
on top of that
on top of that
was the
geopolitical crisis as well. The Ukraine war, Russia invaded Ukraine, and disruptions of supply chain. What makes it inflationary was that supply chain was being disrupted. Chain,
this
company A get the supply from company B, company B get the supply from company C, and so on. When there's breakdown in supply because of all this plus the COVID-19, there is really uneven recovery. Uneven. The companies that enjoy the most because of COVID, transportation company that has to do with shipments, everything, because of online purchasing. Companies that enjoy get the benefit from this pandemic was anything to do with online learning, computer, software. They enjoy the benefit of this COVID-19. But other companies suffer in plantation because of lockdowns, manufacturing. However, lately, because of the world on the edge, di tepi, on the edge of global recession yet again. Already there's a sign already of even Samsung, for example, must reduce production of microchips because of recession already in. People are not buying new handphones. People. So they say already. I'm gonna share with you the news. On that, Samsung cut production because of lower demand in microchips. So it's like a turning story. The story turned during the pandemic. Anything that has to do with computer went up. But now computer of course will use microchips, will use all this semiconductor. But particularly today, because of the recession now seeping in, beginning to start globally. So what we have today is kind of inflation and the economy is stagnant. So what we call stagflation today. We are seeing stagflation. What is it that stagflation? Inflation is high, but on the other hand, opposite way of inflation, because economic theory says if the economy grows so fast, there's gonna be inflation. Opposite, right? Now, there's inflation because of breakdown of supply chain, everything, and because of and also the rising of costs globally. And at the same time, the dollar has gone up because the Fed increase interest rates, and all other countries currency went down compared with the dollar. So we're having inflation. Inflation is from the high United States, 8.9% inflation rate in United States. That's why United States must
increase interest rates
to tackle inflation.
but that affects
already
affected already
other countries globally.
while
At the same time, the economy was not moving, was sluggish because of this, the impact still of the COVID-19. So what we have today, high inflation but stagnant global economy. So this is stagflation what we have today. So answering you, which way to go? I would go the Bank Negara way. Let the market forces decide, because our ringgit is still manageable. It's not only our ringgit, even Korean won already, even on many other currencies has have reduced their value because of US dollar value increase. US dollar value increase because of successive interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve. So not only Malaysian ringgit suffer, many countries currencies suffer. So let the demand and supply do their work rather than we embark on the begging. Everyone is suffering. Every currency is suffering, not only ringgit. Okay, and is that satisfying you? I don't see begging away now compared with previously. That was a different case. There was a East Asian financial crisis 1997-98. There was a crisis in the particular currency in East Asia only. Yes, I hit the point. In East Asia only, in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, in Korea, in this region only. However, this one is global, not only this region. So makes sense at that time. I support it to beg at that time, but not now. Okay. Any other intervention? Good question. Thank you. Good. Any other intervention? Because I wanna make sure the next presenter is readying his or her slides. Any other questions or intervention or wanna add? Please, right now. My camera is gone. Let me do that again. Please. Yes.
So I'm gonna present about
Go ahead.
what was the Great Recession. The Great Recession refer to the economic downturn from 2007 to 2008 after the bursting of the housing bubble and the global financial crisis. The Great Recession was the most severe economic recession in the US since the Great Depression of the 1930s. In response to
I cannot see your slide. Maybe my computer, the line is not good. I cannot see your slide. Let me ask you all. Maybe I'm alone, cannot see it because of my line.
boleh tengok tak?
Anyone else?
Yes, we can see the slide.
Can see the slide.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Only me. I cannot see it. My line. Okay, go ahead.
In the response to the Great Recession, unprecedented fiscal, monetary, and regulatory policy was unleashed by federal authorities, which some, but not at all, credited the subsequent recovery. Causes of global Great Recession. First one, excessive risk-taking in a favorable macroeconomic environment. Too many financial firms taking on too much risk. The shadow banking system, which included investment firms, grew to rival the depository banking system but was not under the same scrutiny or regulation. When the shadow banking system failed, the outcome affected the flow of credit to consumer and business. Second, increased borrowing by banks and investors. This created asset bubbles, especially in the housing market, as mortgages were extended at low interest to unqualified borrowers who could not repay them. Third, regulatory